Good afternoon. I'm Beth Keller from Highland Park Public Library. On behalf of the Highland Park Public Library and Glencoe Public Library and Vernon Area Public Library, we'd like to welcome you to today's program with Dr. Kerry Burnight to discuss her best-selling book, Joyspan, The Art and Science of Thriving in Life's Second Half. I'm joined today by Grace Hayek at Glencoe Public Library and Raz Topolsky at Vernon Area Public Library. Thanks to the Book Bin in Northbrook for supporting this event with online sales of the book Joyspan. The store is offering a 10% discount when ordering the book through the store's website. Books can be shipped to you or picked up at the store. You can find the link to purchase the book in the chat box, or you can, of course, check it out from the library. Again, the book is Joyspan, The Art and Science of Thriving in Life's Second Half. I'd now like to turn it over to my colleague Grace Hayek from Glencoe Public Library to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
I'm pleased to introduce gerontologist Dr. Kerry Burnight, who is sparking a global revolution to make older better. Her New York Times bestselling book, Joyspan, posits that the key to a good longevity isn't the length of your life, it's the quality of your life. Dr. Burnight taught geriatric medicine and gerontology for 18 years at the University of California, Irvine School of Medicine, where she co-founded and directed the nation's first elder abuse forensic center. Currently, she's a researcher who teaches at the University of Chicago. Her research has been featured in the New York Times, The Guardian, CBS Mornings, and Oprah Daily. This year, she was selected by Time magazine as one of the Time 100 most influential people in health. Dr. Kerry, thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll let you take it from here.
I'm delighted to be here. I am a huge library fan, and I am so eager to get to talk about this issue that we are all doing, and that is aging. So I thought we could use this time to dig into not just Joyspan, but this whole thing about growing older. Every day, 12,000 more of us in the United States are joining the ranks of those 65 and older. And as a gerontologist for about 37 years, what I found is that we have gone crazy about length of life. So it's like, how long, longevity this, longevity that. And we call that lifespan. And yes, we would like to live a long life. But in the 1980s, we added a component to it that made it a lot richer and more meaningful. And that was the term health span, how long you enjoy relatively good physical and cognitive health. And right now, we're at about a 10 to 12 year difference between lifespan and health span. So that's why we're attending to preventive care and diet and exercise and sleep and all the things to increase our health span. But here's the thing. I have thousands of people that I've had the privilege of walking with in their aging journey, and they would live a long time and they would be in pretty good physical and cognitive health, but they would be miserable. And that is the opposite of the goal. So we were looking for terminology to encompass well-being, psychological resilience and strength, life satisfaction, contentment, fulfillment, these kinds of more internal aspects, which is what you talk about at funerals, right? As a gerontologist, I go to a ton of funerals, as you would imagine. And it is these characteristics that we are talking about. We're talking about the connection with other humans. We talk about a person's resilience, their generosity, their love of books and learning or nature, or, a number of other things about that person. So when people ask me the question, where did Joyspan, this term, come from? It did not come from happy, toxic positivity, everything is hunky-dory. In fact, it came from just the opposite. So for 22 years, I ran and was the co-founder of an elder abuse forensic center. And the world that I lived in day after day was suffering. It was a world of people ending up alone, being taken advantage of by strangers or even by family members. And I probably would have stayed in the field of elder abuse and neglect and exploitation forever because it's sadly so needed and so common. But what I found was that there is a research literature that shows us the elements of preventing what ultimately ends in suffering, right? So it feels academic in what I was doing, to study all like the sort of darker side of life. But when you look at those same variables, and when you look at, for example, connection as opposed to loneliness, we can find things that earlier on in our life that we can modify it. So we're more used to talking about our physical bodies. So let's start there. So physically, with physical strength, and you're doing a lot of the things that contribute to your physical strength. And those fall into 4 categories. So those fall into aerobic exercise, working our heart, strength, making sure that our muscles, the currency of physical strength, making sure that we're working on flexibility, because a lot of the time shuffling and falls actually come from lack of flexibility. And then equilibrium training, doing things like brushing your teeth on one foot and trying to work on these areas. You get a lot of information about those things, and I'm sure you are working to various degrees, all of us, on some of those physical elements that are small, that you do every day, that are choices, that are action. Okay, so with that in mind, the same is true for this internal strength. And the terminology that I'm using is Joyspan. Joy, it's not the same as happy. Joy, as defined by the American Psychological Association, is contentment, psychological well-being, life satisfaction. So you can't always tell if somebody is experiencing joy. A lot of times it looks subdued and calm, or sometimes people have a great big smile on their face and they're miserable, right? So I always want to start out by saying that joy span is not the same as happy. Happy comes and goes and is often impacted by external circumstances. Joy, as we're using it here, is a deeper akin to contentment. So the research that what is it that predicts somebody's joy span, that predicts whether you're going to like the number 80, 90, 100 years, or whether it's just 20 or 30 years additional suffering. What we found is that they too group into 4 areas, just like the physical grouped into those areas. And my dream was that it was going to be an acronym, a real snappy acronym that we could use. But I found that we ultimately needed to use the words that it was. And they're all verbs because they all take work. It starts with a G and ends with a G. So that gives us something. And the middle 2 are CA. And I happen to be in California. So if that helps, great. If not, GCAG. I had some people recently said that they were musical and they said they played it and they said, oh, it's these notes. So however you memorize it, but I want to go over those because what I would love is through this wonderful library course that you would have some action steps of some real practical ways to bolster proactively your psychological well-being in longevity. The reason this is so important is because growing older isn't easy. The one thing I can guarantee you is the outcome for all of us is the same. and it is what nature intended, is that we pass away. And before we pass away, there's hard stuff. So when people say to me as a gerontologist, I just want to age gracefully. I just want to be healthy forever. I just want to make sure that my husband and I, don't pass away. I think I've never met anybody who had it entirely graceful or easy. And people, you do lose your spouse. You do have chronic and acute health conditions and diagnoses that you never expected. And it is because of the very real, huge challenges of growing older that we need these tools to bolster ourselves for the journey. And before you say, oh, it's just genetics or it's just luck, the research shows us that genetics plays a role, but it's between 14 and 25% of the variability of how you'll experience your long life. And that means that the rest is up to us, and it is things that we proactively do. So I'm going to go into these 4 verbs. And before we even get out of the starting gate, there's one thing that you need to do, and that is to recognize the $60 billion anti-aging industry that has been so lucrative in cultivating fear. And the messaging from when we were very little is that old is bad. You need to stay young. You need to lament growing older, and you need to do all these things to fix yourself. It isn't true. It's not that it's easy, but the research shows us that growing older is simply not all decline. There are many things that get better as you get older, but nobody draws attention to them because they're not lucrative, right? It is fear that sells. And so this messaging that it is, oh, such a shame to have lines and wrinkles on our necks, or that we mustn't have gray hair, or that a muffin top on our waist is a moral failure. That's for making money for somebody else. And our first countercultural step is to reject it. So there's ageism, but there is internalized ageism. So before we get into these 4 verbs today, when you hear anything that is you telling yourself that, oh, he might be having a senior moment, or it's too late for that, or I'm just not lucky, or I'm really losing it, counter that, because it is dangerous. And in fact, research out of Yale has shown that those who endorse age beliefs that it's all decline live on average 7.5 years shorter and in worse physical and cognitive health than those who proactively endorse an aging mindset that recognize, in addition to the challenges and decline in some areas, there is increased growth and opportunity in other areas. So by doing this, you might be adding 7.5 years to your life and to your health. So that matters. Okay, so we are ready with these 4. So the first letter, G. G is grow. So humans were intended to continue to grow in terms of self-development and challenge all life long. So the notion that somehow there's a cutoff point of where our growth stops and where we just start to stagnate is harming us. It has been shown to harm our physical health, to harm our cognition, and to harm our well-being, or what I call our joy span. So how do you keep growing all life long? 1, do hard things. So if you find certain things with technology to be challenging, as I do, those are the things we want to lean into and push yourself to do things. I am lucky enough to work with people who are 90 and better all the time. And I have someone I'm working with now who, because she's not driving, has put her mind to doing Instacart. And for the first maybe 10 times, it was really frustrating because the buttons were small and things, and but because of her growth mindset, because of her recognition that growth matters all life long, she persisted in being uncomfortable and getting to be a beginner in that. And now she is way better in Instacart than I am. And she'll even ask me when we have an appointment, could she order anything for me? And she can then have it sent to my house, which I so appreciate. And I have taken her up on that. So growth requires curiosity. It requires discomfort. And it requires rejecting the notion that it's too late or that somehow, oh, we can't do that. And I will give you an example because I think sometimes examples from other lives kind of hit home. I have the privilege of working with a woman who is 89, who lives in a skilled nursing facility because of a lot of physical challenges. And she decided, now that her mobility is really limited, she's essentially bedbound, that what her growth area was going to be listening. And it really, I too think that I have a lot to gain in terms of being a really, really good listener. So she listened to TED Talks and podcasts and Audible books and read books from her library and has become the most incredible listener. Every time I go to visit her, there's a line of people practically there wanting to share, to be fully seen and fully heard, myself included. I always look forward to our visits. And I think what a great example is that there is always room for continued growth, and that research shows that those who continue to grow have the highest levels of fulfillment and well-being. I wanted to highlight a study that was conducted by the MIT Age Lab and CentraWell, who is a primary care provider in a number of states. And they looked at 6,600 adults, 62 and older, who they asked questions about fulfillment. And if you would like to guess in the chat, if you feel like going down to the chat, you could put what percentage of these 6,600 people felt fulfilled in their lives. What percentage would you guess? Do you think 100% or do you think 2%? What percent would you guess? Okay, so people are locking in their guesses. Okay, so I see one that was quite close. What they found, the MIT Age Lab found that only 54% of Americans 62 and older felt fulfilled in their life, meaning that 46% of people weren't feeling fulfilled. And that is what we're getting at. And these are the variables shown to increase fulfillment, right? Continuing to leaning into that where you can grow. So are you curious about Bitcoin or birds or mentoring or, all of these geopolitical issues that we need help with? So we did the first, and that is grow. Okay, now that we're getting used to the chat down below, what is the next letter in this crazy acronym that we're working through? We started with the G, and then the next letter is anybody getting it? Yes, C. So connect. There's an overwhelming literature about the value of connection in increasing well-being and longevity. So the Harvard longitudinal study was an 85-year study of people over time. And what they found was that the biggest predictor of well-being wasn't physical health, wasn't financial security, wasn't part of the country. It was, in fact, connection, meaningful connection with other humans. And connection is challenging as we grow older. The same study that I just referred to showed a dip in fulfillment around the age of retirement as people, the purpose component, the schedule component, but also this human connection component. And many of my people that I get to work with, they have outlived their friends. And so my own mom, for example, is 97 years old, and I write about her a lot in the book. and she has outlived her friends. So with social connection, we need to diversify our social portfolio in the same way that we've learned to diversify our financial portfolio. We can't put all our friendships in the same basket, right? Because if we just have those same friends that we've had maybe in high school or college or from raising our kids, we outlive them. So this means that the way to have enough connection to last us what might be 100-year lives is to be the proactive friend who reaches out. So every time someone comes to me and says, I have found this phase of my life pretty lonely. After my husband died and I'm living alone, it's pretty quiet and nobody reaches out to me and I really don't have anything to look forward to. After I listen carefully, I then ask the same question. And the question is, tell me about the plans that you've made or the ways that you consistently reach out to other people. And then invariably, there's this kind of quiet. And I haven't really been the one to text, to create a book club, to make a plan, to invite a bunch of people to coffee, to start talking to, somebody that you see consistently who helps check you out at the grocery store. So it takes being that friend. And in that regard, we need to be able to kiss a lot of frogs because nobody is for everyone and everyone is lonely sometimes. And a good definition of lonely that I like from the UCLA loneliness scale is simply wishing that you had more social interaction than you currently have. So that means that you can be lonely in a marriage, you can be lonely in a crowded room, you can be not lonely by yourself. And I know a lot of us like our time alone. I actually love it so much. But I then also have times of loneliness. And then I'm asking myself, how have I proactively reached out to other people? Something as simple as I have some lemons in my backyard. I'm going to go and deliver them to a neighbor and try to strike up a conversation. So it's not these big gestures, it's these little tiny gestures, these little tiny action verbs is how we have the connection necessary to sustain our joy span for whether we're going to live one more day or whether we're going to live 40 more years. And we're all in the same boat in that we really don't know that. Okay, so the next letter, we've started with G. We moved to C. What is this next letter verb that we're going after? Putting it in the chat now. Exactly. A. So that A is adapt. The one thing that we know is that there's going to be change. And often it's things that we didn't want. Like, I did not ask for this. I did not ask for my retina to detach. I did not ask for my spouse to be living with cognitive impairment or my adult child to, be living with a condition or a tragedy or a challenge. So the difference between people who were able to maintain well-being in longevity wasn't the people who didn't have hard things happen, because that's no one. It's the people who are proactively deciding to adapt to these unwanted circumstances. And by adapt, that research is out of Israel. And the definition is feeling the grief of what it is that you're carrying, not denying it, not just faking positivity about this thing, right? Recognizing, like, wow, I did not expect this diagnosis, and this is hard and lonely, and I feel crappy. And I can then live out the rest of my life mad about it and suffering about it. And that's your choice. I mean, you can do that. And we can't make a choice for anyone else. People always ask me that, like, my mother-in-law, can you make it? No, only the person, each of us makes these decisions. But what the literature shows us is that there are proven coping strategies, both internal coping strategies and external coping strategies that enable us to walk with these very real, very painful challenges. To give you an example of an external coping strategy, and I list these in my book in terms of checklists and workbooks and interactive. And I wanted to let you know that there are some kind of AI copycats who make these Joyspan workbooks that kind of look like it has to do with me or the book, and it doesn't. And so there's only this one Joyspan book, and you don't need to buy a separate thing because all the exercises are right in it. So if you are borrowing one from the library, wonderful. You could do the exercises on a separate piece of paper, or if you have the book, you can write it right into it. So that's my anti-AI commercial, because people have been disappointed by these workbooks, and they have every right to be, because they're just copycats. And that's true with all books. It's very strange. And that's why supporting local bookstores is the way to go as well. So I was going to give you an example of an internal and external coping strategy. So, an internal coping strategy is about how we frame these things. And my example is that when I was writing the chapter on adapt, I was, saying it's important that we adapt to life's unexpected circumstances, these things that we don't want and didn't wish for. And as I was writing that chapter, our adult daughter, who is just about to attend medical school, was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And in that moment, instead of going off to train to become a physician, she then couldn't go and became a patient. And I'll tell you about the outcome of that. But in that moment, I thought, I'm not unique. None of us are unique. As humans, we're going to have things that are rough. And how do you adapt to these things? So, one of the internal parts that helped a coping strategy was I needed to get so that I could share this grief, and talking with other people and letting people know how I was feeling wasn't easy. And it, is not really that comfortable for me. But having read all this, I pushed myself to do it. And I pushed myself to say, this is what I'm going through right now. And it's, hurting me so bad. And I'm feeling all the feelings, and I feel alone, and I feel mad. And in doing that, I was able to shift to think I am not alone. A lot of people have had adult children with every kind of circumstance and losing adult children. And I had a group of patients that I still work with who are all in their 90s. And when I shared this situation with them, I had one who had lost a daughter, and I didn't know about that. And she shared that with me. And that was just so, so helpful. So the outcome of that is, happily, our girl wasn't able to go to that, but wait a year and go to a different medical school that is near her neurologist. And of course, it's not anything that we love, but it's also something that we have come to adapt to. And we all have that stuff, every human alive. So I didn't expect that one. So now, what is the next letter? So we had G, we had C, we had A, and then the home stretch. I'm looking in the chat, going down to see what people are putting in there. I can wait. Exactly. G. So the final verb that we're talking about, of what the research shows enabled us to maximize our joy span, grow. No, the first G was grow. The last G was give. And giving is tied into the purpose literature, into the meaning literature, into what it is that gets us up in the morning. So give, I like because it's a verb. And a bit of the problem, I think, with the purpose literature is that purpose seems like capital P, like such a big thing. We need to be out to cure cancer. Whereas Give is this recognition that as long as we are alive, we have something to give. And in order to do that, we need to, like we said from the beginning, is brush off this pervasive internal narrative that we have less to give because we're older. We have so much to give. The research shows us that what gets better as you get older is emotional regulation. I'm looking forward to that as I get older. Um, our appreciation of our connection, our humility. Can you imagine a nation leading into humility and others centeredness? Problem solving. And that's one that doesn't really get much attention at all. Like with our attention so much on just technology, the really important part of problem solving. And if I could, I'd like to talk about problem solving with a story. So I have this colleague who has passed away, the incredible late Jean Cohn, who is an MD, PhD in gerontology and geriatric medicine, who taught at Harvard. And he, every Wednesday, would pick his parents up from the train platform because they were in their 90s. And he would pick them up in his car. They would get in, and then he would drive them to his house where they would have dinner together, and then he would drive them home. This one Wednesday, his parents get off as they do with their walkers, and it's just absolutely dumping snow. My friend, Dr. Cohn, was late. So they're just standing there. This was before ubiquitous cell phones. So they're just standing there waiting for their dumb Harvard son to do as he said he would and pick them up. And this is where their problem solving came in. The couple looked over and saw a pizza place, carefully with their walkers went over to the pizza place, and they said, "We'd like to order a pizza and have it delivered to our son's house, and here's the address. And when you deliver that pizza, we'd like to ride along in the car with it." And that is the problem solving that I'm talking about. This ability to draw upon the fact that we in our older lives have thousands and thousands of experiences to draw upon. And that is something we have to give. We need to give. Our society desperately needs for us to give. But if we're muting ourselves and thinking that older is less than, then we are not giving that. We are not offering the solutions that society needs. So I challenge you. I challenge you today to, first of all, recognize that this is going to require you to brush off the ageist, damaging messaging that older is less than, and that holding on to youth is somehow the prize. And then after that, I would love for you to think about these 4 verbs and think about, what do I want to start with? Do I want to be thinking more about how I grow, how I connect, how I adapt, how I give? And humans every day have over 60,000 thoughts, and we make around 15,000 decisions. I'm going to wear these shoes. I'm going to eat this and do this and call this. So in these thousands of thoughts and in these thousands of decisions, to decide, to make the choice that my long life is important enough and the quality of my life is up to me. And so that I'm going to choose joy. I'm going to choose growth. I'm going to choose proactive connection. I'm going to choose adapting. I'm going to choose giving of myself in some small way. Giving of myself by saying, hey, you're going through chemo. I'd love to drive you if that would be of help, right? Like to go out of our way to give of ourselves, because the research really shows that it is those 4 things that will enable us to not end up in old age suffering, to not end up like the thousands of adults that I've worked with who having a long life was the opposite of a gift. It was a long life without well-being. That's the opposite of what we're going for. So I would also love to give you one last challenge, and then we're going to open it up to questions after this last challenge. So you're getting rid of the ageism that is all around us, that we all have. We are working on those 4 verbs. And then this other action step is when you wake up in the morning, tomorrow morning, there's going to be a moment that kind of sets the stage. And what we as humans do sometimes is as we're waking up, we think, oh, my hip hurts. My son's getting a divorce. I got to replace the water heater. Darn it all, if, and the way that our brain works, the reticular activating system of our brain, is that we see what we have called attention to. We see more of that. And the proof that you need of that is simply when you buy a new car, let's say you got a Toyota Corolla, you're out on the road and you see Toyota Corollas everywhere because you've called attention to that. The same is true by starting out with all the things that are wrong about aging, our thinning hair, our whatever the things that we're drawing out, that's what we'll see more of. But tomorrow, you will start afresh. You will think of 10 things, maybe even before you open your eyes, of, I am grateful that this knee doesn't hurt. You know, I'm going to go down and have a cup of coffee, which I love. I'm going to go see my old dog and have a moment with that dog. I'm going to look out the window and see what I see. I'm going to give someone a call. I'm going to try to be of help. And by drawing attention to those 10 things that are right, also could be 10 things that you're grateful for. Today I was a little tired and I just said, I'm grateful for this pillow. It's going to put you on a different path. And those little decisions are going to impact how you experience your longevity. So let's now turn our attention to a few questions so that we might have a little bit of interaction, which I always think, and thank you so much, Roz, for leading that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like here, you've given us so much to think about. Like you've given us a lot to think about. I took so many notes on your talk. And we're gonna take some questions. I also just want to start with like, how do you might conv if you know of a how do you kind of convince someone to perhaps begin like rethinking about their life in this fashion? Like maybe we know someone that we think might be kind of suffering from, you know, not seeing the vitality in their life and being perhaps depressed about their like how would you tell someone like us to perhaps like coach someone to like rethink the way they view their life?
I love that question. And it is very, very much a case of just like on the airline, when you put your mask thing on yourself first.
Yeah.
So the way that we change, like everyone recognizes, we have got to change what this thing about being older is like. We have to start with ourselves, right? So, step one isn't the person that we want to change. It isn't going, hey, I think you might need this Joyspan book. Doesn't work. I know because I've tried it. What it is our own aging. Like we're going to change it with ourselves first. And whether you are 23 today or whether you are 93 today, these small steps that we're making in our own lives are going to make a difference. And so we're starting with our own reconceptualization of aging and our proactive approach to maximizing our well-being. Then, after you have done the exercises, after you're feeling pretty darn good about growing older, you might, in a conversation with the person, your partner, your parent, your best friend, you might say, wow, I found a lot of change and improvement when I started looking at the literature on well-being and longevity. And something that I changed was I now no longer wait for people to reach out to me in terms of friendship, but I am really leaning into doing this thing and making my book club or whatever. So a lot of times I've had people come back to me and say, when I started with myself, when I got vulnerable and shared with somebody about my journey, it did pique somebody's interest because as as entrenched or crabby or mad people are about it, people ultimately want to enjoy life. And when there are things in our way, which depression, anxiety, mental illness, substance abuse, there are professionals who can really help us. And I am really all for going, seeking counseling. Antidepressant and anti-anxiety medications can be of help. Support groups can be of help. These individual practices, the recognition that we need to make sure, like, I have patients now who are deciding between food and needed medication. They simply can't pay their rent, right? Like, we've got to address all of these issues and see aging as the whole picture, the whole person for it. So I love our impetus to want to help others, and I think we will, but we need to start with ourselves and then share in a way that isn't like, this is me trying to change you. It is, this is me recognizing that I still had some space to learn what the research said in this area. And I found it helpful. You might find it helpful too. And then you could either share the book or kind of talk it through or give some tangible examples.
That sounds like a good strategy. We have a question. Somebody wants to know if you could talk a little bit about external coping mechanisms. We kind of talked about that a little earlier when we were talking about adapting to changes. So can you give us maybe talk about external, maybe give an example about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wish I had it in front of me, but where I am today, I'm visiting my lovely 97-year-old mom. I'm at her house and I didn't bring the book with me. But if I did, I would turn to that page because in the Adapt chapter, there's a whole list of them, only research approved, research proven methods, because there's a lot of garbage out there. But one of them, for example, that is considered external is support groups. So being with people who are traveling with the same thing. So I have a lot of friends who have spouses and partners who are living with cognitive impairment. And it's, very challenging. And I know a lot of people on this call today are in that circumstance. And you feel like the very person I want to lean on and tell how hard this is the person who is having these cognitive challenges. And I feel alone. So anything that we can think of, for example, adult children with brain tumors. There was a support group for that I joined, and it was even specific to the kind of brain tumor called an acoustic neuroma or vestibular schwannoma, to be with other people who are walking with that same thing. So that is an external method, as is talking with a professional counselor, as is seeing a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and recognizing that it is the norm that all of us are going to have some real times where we're like, I'm not okay. I don't even feel like I even have any energy to want to invest in feeling better because I feel so bad. And that doesn't mean that you're unusual or that you are beyond finding joy again.
There's a kind of a question, well, kind of a comment in the Q&A that I thought I would just share about someone who says agrees with all this, thinks it's spot on, and she indicated that she had an accountability buddy, and she realized this accountability buddy that she realized her long-term goal of writing a novel, and so I guess having this partner is kind of she didn't put it off what she was wanting to do all her life, and she was able to like finds gratitude through and joy and volunteering and all that. She doesn't think through having this partner who was able to kind of keep her accountable to some of her feelings. And she also saw a therapist for a couple of years, which helped her also kind of get the support that she needed to age gracefully. So anyhow, this is just someone who just
Mm.
had a really great experience doing some of the things that you've talked about here.
I am grateful. And accountability, like, you just start with one, like one person that you can say, I'm not okay. And could we like walk this together? And it often feels great, as hard as it is to ask for help. We are in a society that puts independence so much up on a pedestal, but actually, we are all interdependent. Like at every life stage, we require this interdependence. And a lot of times, when we muster up the courage to start with one person to share with, and whether you call them an accountability partner or just somebody that you are like, I'm going to get real with you right now. I want to tell you about this. It can be really so very helpful to feel like you're not alone. And because a lot of times we will outlive our friends, um, sometimes like having additional friends who are in younger ages can be really helpful. And that's something that my mom really did at 97. She really hasn't, her whole address book is crossed
Mm.
out, but she proactively like pushed herself to reach out to a group of women that just once she started with one who is in her 70s. And my mom happened to call this group the Youngs, and the Youngs get together and they play cards. And these women in their, mid and late 70s feel like it's, oh, we're the Youngs, So, yeah, it takes a bit of creativity with these long lives, but it's just when you see as much suffering as I've seen, you will do whatever it takes to think like, I want to bolster people to have the resources and the connection and the tools in their toolbox to not end up hurting so bad at the end of life.
Let's see, there's a few more comments coming in. One person wants to mention that there's a center called the Jocelyn Center, and they have many free support groups via Zoom too. And she just wanted to share that resource. I'm not familiar with it, but she wanted to share that resource. So I want to mention that. Someone else mentioned that volunteering she has found has been like a really great source for interacting with people of different ages. And I know that our library, we actually had last year had this retirement fair where it was like for people that were like recently retired or looking to retire, and we wanted to provide them with resources for like recreation, education, volunteering, things like that, so they could kind of find interesting things during their retirement years to kind of keep them busy and challenged. And the volunteer activities were very popular. People really enjoyed that aspect. So that someone here is just kind of talking about how much they've found, volunteering to be like very valuable at this stage in their life.
I
Um,
love that. And volunteering it hits all the boxes, right? So volunteering is our give, but it's also a great way to connect with like-minded people and anything that you're interested in. Let's say it's gardening, you can get into something and have people who are interested in what you're interested helps with our growth. And then a lot of times it helps with adapting. For example, I have a group that I know, and it was people they were all interested in something that I haven't particularly been interested in, but it was software engineering. And so then they got in together, and then one of the men in that group lost his eyesight. He had a retina detach. And then he had this group of people, and he said, like, how can I do this? And I was watching his group help him adapt. So as I was watching it, I thought this is really hitting the grow, connect, adapt, and give all through what started out was an interest group and actually it was intergenerational volunteer group where the younger people and the older people were helping one another out. And frankly, it was to me the younger people who were getting the most out of it because in listening to the conversations, I kept hearing the older people saying, look, put your phone down, close your computer, go outside for a little while, take a deep breath. There's a whole world out there. You don't need to put so much pressure on yourself and be online 24/7. And I watched over and over again, lives on both ends of the spectrum improved. And I thought how hopeful that is.
Let's see. There's someone who wrote that their library has a branch at a senior center, and she wants to know if your book, Joyspan, would make a good book club selection.
Oh, well, it's been the book club book for a lot of books and for a lot of book clubs. And I'm very grateful for that. People have been very positive about it. And Georgetown University just picked it for their alumni book.
Mm.
And so they had all these book events, and it was men and women and people of all different ages. So you don't have to wait until your second half of life because these the psychological well-being literature applies just as much from a 24-year-old as it does to a 104-year-old. So
Mm.
it's not too early to start on joy span, but it's also not too late. So I also get that question. I was with somebody yesterday who is almost 100, and she said, "Do you think it's too late for me? I'm kind of set in this pattern." And when we talked about it, the fact that she wanted to be able to access more joy in her life made it possible. I mean, she took some real steps that I'm pretty sure are going to result in being able to feel that well-being that she was interested in feeling.
And what about, we talked I know there's a lot of I just want to talk about the influence of like the media and our culture and like older people feeling this way and how we kind of combat that. Like, the way how do we you might see books or movies or that kind of portray older people as maybe being not as valuable. And so what's your take on just trying to address how the media and our culture kind of portrays that?
Okay, it's a great question because it is so pervasive and it's not going to change from a 20-year-old all of a sudden having an aha moment that, oh, it has to come from us. So we got to start with ourselves, changing it so that younger people can look to this age and think, okay, I see. But when it breaks my heart because every single day I hear people kind of bad mouthing themselves.
Mm.
Like, oh my gosh, look at this, look at this gray hair, or I used to be this size, or oh man, I can't do that technology anymore, right? Like we're adding into that, which is not only bad for your health, but it makes the people behind us go, oh, I don't want to get old. So if you can recognize that at your funeral, nobody's going to say, oh my goodness, Roz didn't have a wrinkle and she had absolutely abs of steel. They're going to be talking about remembering your generosity of time, the way you could throw your head back and laugh, the way that you showed up in a really dark time, the way that you maybe didn't judge somebody that everybody else was judging. So it like these internal characteristics that can get better as we get older are the most important ones. So it's almost like every single day recognizing $60 billion industry is telling me that it's bad to get old so that they make money. I'm not I'm not falling into it. And so an analogy that I use is there was a time not long ago where it was like women couldn't have their own credit card. They couldn't vote. They couldn't lead companies. They couldn't be doctors. And now most of us think how ridiculous that is. And the same is true with not recognizing the value of older and not seeing it in ourselves, right? So it's one by one by one, we are going to be the pioneers reformatting what the new longevity looks like so that we can be role models. And there are thousands of role models in this world that we can look to and go, I want to be like that guy.
Okay, I think maybe this might be our last question here. Someone wrote, what will you tell women so we don't fall into this multi-billion-dollar anti-aging business and start loving ourself aging without shame? There's so much pressure, therefore, this feels so hard to do. Is there a baby step that you could recommend, or where would be a good place to start?
Love you. Thank you for that question. Because if we're honest, we all need it. So when we were 2 years old, we started with the fairy tales that was like the old witch with the wart on her nose. She came with her claws and ate the children. Good night. Like that's the foundation that was laid. And then ever on every social media, every magazine, every TV show, everything, we're getting this message, which is don't get old. You will be ugly and awful. And so a baby step is just the recognition that when we look in the mirror, when we have a thought. So I had one yesterday. So I was talking on my phone like this, and I had, as one does, an angle where it was just an amazing, like 20 chins. And my first reaction was, oh no. And then I was able to stop myself and say, of course, I'm almost 60. I've been bending my chin. Of course, it's going to be like that. I don't, if somebody else had that, I wouldn't care. I would think, yeah, that's how a chin does it. But it's cognitive behavioral therapy to replace these toxic thoughts and replace them. So a tiny step would be, can you find a time today where you are having any thought negative toward yourself? And it could be like maybe when you're at the gym thinking, or it could be like when you step on the scale, that you can replace that thought with thinking, we're all going to be dead. And what will matter before will be nothing with these meat suits that we're wearing. And it will be everything with like the person that we are and the legacy that we left. And did I laugh today? Did I actually see the beauty of nature? Did I make someone feel seen? Like these are the biggies. And if you're doing those, applaud yourself inside to say, like, I made that person laugh. Like I recently fell at speaking of something that happens sometimes in second half. I was just walking too fast in an airport and my heel, which I don't usually wear, got stuck in my cuff of my pants, and I just all the way fell to the ground. And I'm so grateful that I didn't break anything. But I was embarrassed, and I thought, you have a choice here. Laugh authentically. And the man who pulled me up, I had a moment with him. We laughed, they laughed, and everybody started laughing. It was all, and I thought, like, that was different. And I did have a choice in how I responded to something. And we'll never run out of material when we learn to laugh at ourselves and the ridiculousness of a lot of these things. So, um, in a word, remember your choice. And I will leave you with someone so far superior to me in terms of thinking, and that is Viktor Frankl. Many of you have read his book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he was a physician who had to be in a concentration camp, enduring the darkest, worst of human existence. When he got out, and it was just a miracle that he lived, he wrote Man's Search for Meaning in just a matter of days because he had thought about it in his head. And what he wrote is, regardless of life circumstances, we can maintain our spiritual freedom. And that means that even the roughest diagnoses, even losing our loved ones, even all that is going on in the world, we still have some spiritual freedom. And that is hopeful.
Well, Kerry, thank you. I think we are going to wrap up. Grace and Beth, we wanted to join us on camera again. We've had some really nice comments in the chat. People really appreciated this, and a number who wanted to make sure that we're being recorded because they want to share it with their friends. And so, yes, it is recorded, and it will be up on the library YouTube's channel probably by early next week. So, yes, we will send you the link, and please share this conversation with your friends because it sounds like lots of people are really eager to do so.
Grow older. Here's to older. Here's to older you. Here's to saying, I'm turning 85, I'm turning 97. Like, here's to it. Let's reformat this and let's everybody on this call or who has seen the recording be the ambassadors to tell other people so we can change this ridiculous older system thing that we have in place now.
Amen.
Do it. Let's get
Um,
old.
And I also just want to mention, Carrie's book is available through the Book Bin, which is located in downtown Northbrook, and they're offering 10% off. People that have been watching this webinar, so please, feel free to look into that. And I think that is it for this afternoon. Anything else?
Thank you all for joining us. And Kerry, thank you so much for sharing so much wonderful information. Like Raz said, I was taking copious notes. Um, so thank you. It was a privilege to be able to host you and bring you to our libraries.
Well, I wish we could now go out and get a sandwich. That's the limitation of Zoom, but I'll have a sandwich with my mom, which will be great.
That's amazing and wonderful. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us. And again, thank you, Kerry.